He left the house with the calm assurance of someone who believed the ending had been written by his own hand. The door closed behind him with a soft, ordinary sound, and that, to him, felt like proof. No shouting. No pleading. No chaos. Just a clean exit. He told himself that this was how mature decisions looked: quiet, efficient, inevitable. Every step down the driveway reinforced the story he preferred, that he had weighed every variable, anticipated every reaction, and emerged ahead. In his mind, the math was simple. The house, the accounts, the future, everything had already been divided long before he packed a single box. He had rehearsed the conversations, prepared for resentment, braced for tears that never came. Her silence confirmed his confidence. He mistook restraint for resignation, composure for collapse. Control, after all, often feels like calm. She stood still inside the doorway, hands resting loosely at her sides. She did not ask him to stay. She did not follow. Her eyes traced his back without urgency, without anger. The space around her held unfinished things: a lamp still unplugged, a picture frame leaning against the wall, a chair pushed slightly out of place. The house seemed to pause with her, as if waiting. He never turned around. He didn't notice the way the silence stretched, not empty but watchful. He missed how her stillness wasn't surrender, but balance. In leaving so confidently, he mistook motion for power and quiet for defeat. The victory he felt was real only to him, fragile as the certainty that carried him away from the door. He walked on believing control was something you could carry with you, unaware it was already slipping behind him, settling into the quiet spaces he chose not to see, waiting for its moment to surface. The marriage did not collapse all at once. It thinned slowly, worn down by habits that passed for stability. Conversations shortened, then disappeared. Decisions were made without discussion, explained after the fact as necessities. He called it confidence, the kind required to move forward. She learned it was simply control dressed in certainty, a steady narrowing of space that left no room for her voice. He spoke often about ambition, about sacrifices that had to be made. Long hours, missed dinners, postponed trips were framed as investments in a future he claimed to be building for them both. In truth, the future increasingly carried only his name. Success, in his telling, was personal, earned alone, defended fiercely. When praise came, he accepted it without hesitation. When strain appeared, he expected her to absorb it quietly. She became skilled at making herself smaller. Not invisible by accident, but by repetition. She listened more than she spoke. She adjusted plans, smoothed tensions, learned which questions led nowhere. Her restraint was mistaken for agreement. Her silence was read as loyalty. Over time, even she began to wonder when her presence had become optional. There were signs he ignored because they did not serve him. Documents she set aside, mentioned once, then never again. Family calls he dismissed as distractions. Promises postponed until they expired on their own. Each oversight felt minor, forgettable. Together, they formed a pattern of erasure. By the time the marriage finally broke, it did so quietly, already hollowed out by years of being overlooked, misnamed, and underestimated. What he never considered was how carefully she noticed everything he dismissed. Each slight, each delay, each brushed aside truth settled somewhere durable. The damage wasn't loud, but it was thorough, shaping an ending neither of them yet named or anticipated fully. By the time he told her it was over, he had already finished the work that mattered to him. Papers were signed, accounts reviewed, outcomes predicted. He had spoken to lawyers who nodded at his reasoning, friends who confirmed his logic, voices that reflected his own back to him until doubt felt unnecessary. Emotionally, he believed he had prepared as well. He had rehearsed the conversation in his head, practiced calm detachment, convinced himself that clarity was kindness. He explained things carefully, as if delivering a conclusion rather than a decision. He spoke about fairness, about moving forward, about how this was better for both of them. He expected resistance, questions, anger, bargaining. Instead, she listened. She did not interrupt. She did not argue. When he finished, she simply nodded once, as though he had confirmed something she already knew. Her silence unsettled him briefly, but he translated it quickly into defeat. Acceptance, he decided. Emotional exhaustion. He mistook her restraint for collapse, her stillness for loss. He filled the quiet with his own certainty, telling himself that this was what maturity looked like when one person was strong enough to end things cleanly. The day they separated felt complete to him. Boxes were moved. Keys were exchanged. The air between them stayed calm, almost polite. He walked away believing the hardest part was behind him, that whatever remained would fade quietly. Closure, he thought, was something you could claim simply by leaving. He never questioned why it came so easily to him, or why she asked for nothing at all. She never corrected his assumptions because correcting them would have required explanation, and explanation would have given him access he no longer deserved. Inside, her world was anything but quiet. Grief lived there, steady and contained, not sharp enough to break her but heavy enough to remind her of what had been lost. She mourned the version of herself that once believed endurance would be rewarded, that patience meant waiting for recognition. What he called her silence was, in truth, discipline. She had learned when speaking changed nothing and when listening revealed everything. Patience became her strategy, a way to observe without interference, to remember details others forgot. She noted dates, signatures, conversations half finished. She carried memory carefully, like something fragile but valuable, storing it away while appearing empty-handed. Being underestimated came with a cost. It taught her how easily people overlooked her, how confidence in others often grew from dismissal rather than insight. Each time he spoke over her, each time her concerns were waved aside, something hardened into clarity. She stopped trying to be seen and started preparing to stand alone. The shift was quiet, invisible, and irreversible. She did not dream of revenge. She imagined stability, autonomy, a future that did not depend on his approval or belief. Long before he left, she had accepted that the marriage would not save itself. Long before the door closed behind him, she understood that her life would open elsewhere. What he mistook for passivity was already motion, set in place, moving forward without him. It was enough for now to wait, to let timing do its work. Some things ripened only when untouched. She trusted the sequence already unfolding, certain that what was coming no longer required her voice, only her presence in the world ahead alone. The inheritance came from a part of her life he never bothered to understand. Long before their marriage, before shared accounts and negotiated futures, there had been someone who saw her clearly and planned accordingly. A relative with quiet foresight, careful and deliberate, who believed in preparation rather than promises. It was never spoken about dramatically. It existed in conversations held once, documents signed carefully, then folded away and trusted to time. There were conditions attached, not because of mistrust, but intention. The inheritance was designed to remain dormant until a specific threshold was crossed, a moment when it would serve purpose rather than comfort. It could not be accessed jointly. It could not be influenced by marriage. It waited, legally sealed, protected from impulse and interference. To her, it was not a safety net but a contingency, something acknowledged and then left untouched. When she mentioned it early in their relationship, he barely listened. He laughed it off as distant, theoretical, not worth factoring into real plans. Old money, he called it. Complicated. Unlikely. He preferred what he could see, what he controlled, what bore his name. The idea that something substantial existed beyond his reach unsettled him, so he dismissed it entirely. What he never asked about were the safeguards. The clauses designed to survive separation. The documents updated quietly, independently. The language that made ownership unmistakable. The inheritance did not respond to emotion or negotiation. It waited for a trigger, clear and final. That trigger was never about money. It was about independence. About a life fully disentangled. All it required was for her to stand alone, legally and undeniably. And when that moment arrived, it would arrive completely, without warning, without appeal. The mechanism had been set long ago. It had only been waiting for him to leave. The confirmation arrived without ceremony. A message, a document, language precise enough to feel impersonal. She read it slowly, once, then again, letting the meaning settle. The inheritance was no longer dormant. The conditions had been met. It was active, immediate, and entirely hers. No shared signatures. No negotiations. No appeals. The finality of it felt heavier than celebration. She sat at the kitchen table where so many conversations had ended unfinished. Her hands were steady. There was no rush of triumph, no urge to tell anyone. What she felt instead was alignment, the quiet sense that something long delayed had arrived exactly when it should. Power did not announce itself. It simply took its place. Elsewhere, he moved easily through his new life. Plans unfolded the way he expected them to. Dinners, laughter, a future spoken about lightly. He believed momentum was proof of correctness. He never noticed the timing, never questioned how clean his exit had been. For her, the shift was irreversible. Accounts changed. Names disappeared. Access narrowed. Each confirmation reinforced the same truth. This was not shared history, but singular ownership. The safeguards held. The structure worked. The irony rested calmly between the facts. What activated everything was not her action, but his confidence. His decision to leave. The condition had been simple, absolute, and patient. By walking away certain he had won, he completed the final requirement. Power changed hands without confrontation, without noise. It changed because he believed the story was already over. It began as a faint disturbance he couldn't immediately name. Calls went unanswered, messages stalled, familiar doors closed without explanation. Friends spoke carefully, correcting themselves mid-sentence, offering vague reassurances. Distance appeared where access once felt guaranteed. He told himself it was coincidence, timing, nothing worth concern. Confidence fought uneasily with unease. The truth reached him indirectly, stripped of softness. An overheard comment, a document glimpsed, a silence that finally spoke. She had inherited everything. Not jointly, not partially, not in negotiation. Disbelief came first, sharp and urgent. He retraced conversations, recalculated assumptions, searched for loopholes that did not exist. Regret followed close behind, heavier, slower. He called, then texted, then waited. Nothing reopened. Legal boundaries were firm, impersonal, final. Emotional ones were even stronger. She did not need to say no. The structure already had. He understood too late what silence had protected. Power had shifted quietly, legally, completely. What once felt like authority now resembled exclusion. Every option narrowed, every reach stopped short. The confidence he left with returned as consequence. He stood outside a future he assumed was shared. Nothing in it belonged to him anymore. Control revealed itself as temporary, conditional, borrowed. She had moved on without spectacle or permission. The reversal was complete, irreversible, deserved. He was left facing the cost of certainty. It echoed louder than any argument ever had. Late understanding offered no relief, only clarity. And clarity, once arrived, could not be undone. He finally saw what he had lost entirely forever. There was no moment of triumph, no carefully delivered reckoning. What followed was quieter than revenge and far more lasting. Consequences settled into place without drama, shaped by choices already made and boundaries firmly held. The wife did not look back to measure his regret or wait for acknowledgement. Distance was not punishment, it was preservation. Dignity became her daily practice. Autonomy, her reward. She rebuilt her life deliberately, without urgency or explanation. Freedom did not require performance. It showed itself in options, in safety, in the absence of fear. What she carried forward was not bitterness but clarity. She had learned what endurance cost and what it was worth. Silence, once forced upon her, now belonged to her completely. He was left with time and reflection, the weight of assumptions that had once passed for certainty. Control, he realized, had never been absolute. It had depended on her compliance, her patience, her invisibility. Without those, it dissolved. The confidence he trusted most had been built on underestimation, and that miscalculation followed him everywhere. What remained between them was not anger, but understanding sharpened too late. The danger had never been loss, but blindness. Underestimating someone who listens, who waits, who remembers, carries its own quiet cost. The story closed without spectacle, but not without meaning. Power had never announced itself. It endured, quietly, until it was no longer ignored.